If 2020 will be remembered as the year of the pandemic, 2021 should be remembered as the year vaccines gave us hope. On the 1st of March, Apollinaire Sikabi, a contact tracer in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, became one of the first health workers in Africa to receive a COVAX vaccine. This simple vaccination marked the beginning of the largest global rollout of any vaccine in history. The Gavi COVAX AMC is an unprecedented global effort, bringing together 92 participants and over 60 donors, securing over 1.8 billion doses solely for lower-income countries, with funding from governments, corporations, and philanthropies. This historic international cooperation recognizes one simple fact: no country can fight this pandemic alone. The moral case for the COVAX AMC is clear. Protection against this virus should not depend on where you live. The economic case for the COVAX AMC is proven, ensuring quick, equitable access to vaccines everywhere would add $9 trillion to the global economy. The epidemiological case for the COVAX AMC is perhaps the strongest of all. As we have seen with new variants, we will not end this pandemic anyway unless we defeat it everywhere. Nobody is safe until everybody is safe. COVAX has proven that a global solution to the pandemic is possible. Now, it's time to deliver. Protecting nearly 30% of populations, diversifying further our vaccine portfolio, overcoming new variants. The COVAX AMC urgently needs further support to see one world protected.
Honorable world leaders, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to One World Protected, the launch of the Gavi COVAX Advance Market Commitment, also known as the Gavi COVAX AMC. My name is Jen Copestake, and I have the immense pleasure of guiding you through today's event. The video you just watched highlights the dramatic turn that our world took in the past 15 months. COVID-19 spread to every corner of the world. Governments locked down. Travel was restricted. We saw the worst global economic crisis since the Great Depression. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. On the 4th of June last year, I had the honor of moderating Gavi's Global Vaccine Summit, where together we witnessed the launch of the COVAX AMC. Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, administers this innovative financing mechanism. Its goal is to end the acute phase of the pandemic by ensuring no country gets left behind in the global allocation of vaccines. It is the largest and most complex distribution of vaccines in history. During this event, we will be taking a look at what has been achieved in the past 45 weeks, thanks to the support of generous donors, as well as what must come next. Today is about taking stock and assessing the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. First up, I have the great pleasure of introducing our host, Antony Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States, to deliver the opening address. Secretary Blinken will be followed by Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations.
On behalf of the United States government, I'm delighted to join forces with Gavi for the 2021 investment opportunity in support of COVAX's Advanced Market Commitment, which will finance access to safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines for people around the world. But this isn't just an opportunity, it's an imperative. From day one, President Biden has made stopping COVID-19 the top priority of the Biden-Harris administration. And ensuring broad and equitable access to vaccines is an essential part of achieving that goal. To that end, the United States government contributed $2 billion to Gavi in support of COVAX in March, the largest donation COVAX has ever received. And will contribute an additional $2 billion to this effort through 2022, because people everywhere should have access to rigorously tested, safe, and effective COVID-19 vaccines. And because we recognize that as long as COVID is spreading and replicating anywhere, it poses a threat to people everywhere. We applaud the other countries who have made and delivered pledges, which has put us on track to meet Gavi's initial goal to deliver vaccines to at least 20% of people in 92 low and middle income countries by the end of the year. But to beat this pandemic, we need to aim higher, much higher. With $2 billion more to COVAX, we can reach approximately 30% of people in target countries, rather than 20%. Just think for a moment of all the people whose lives would be impacted by hitting that higher target. That's not all we must do. We need to produce more safe, effective vaccines, and we need to distribute them more rapidly. So we call on partners to work alongside Gavi to support urgent vaccine manufacturing, supply, and delivery needs. We also need to make sure people have access to reliable diagnostics and safe further bend the curve. And we have to mitigate the secondary impacts of COVID, like hunger. The faster we do all this, the more lives we save, the quicker we can safely reopen our schools and businesses, and the quicker our communities and economies can recover. At the same time, we need to help countries boost their pandemic preparedness so we can better detect, prevent, prepare for, and respond to future pandemics and other biological threats, because we can't afford to let history repeat itself. The United States Congress recently provided more than $11 billion for America's global COVID response, and we intend to put those resources toward meeting these urgent goals. And we recently named a coordinator for global COVID response and health security, Gail Smith, to lead America's efforts on this front. As we act, let's not lose sight of the human stakes of getting this right. In Nigeria, the first person to get a vaccine from COVAX was a doctor named Ongon Cyprian. He works at the National Hospital in Abuja. He lost many colleagues to the virus. He also lost his own father. On the day he received the vaccine, he was elated, saying, and I quote, "I dreamt of taking this vaccine." But he also said, and I quote, "We will be much happier when almost all of us in Nigeria have gotten the vaccine. I want to see a lot more being done." We all want to see a lot more being done by governments, multilateral organizations, the private sector, foundations, other partners. The health of everyone in all our countries depends on it. Thank you.
Mr. José Manuel Barroso, Mr. Secretary of State, and Madam Administrator, thank you for hosting the launch of the investment opportunity for the Gavi COVAX Advance Market Commitment. We are at a critical juncture in working to ensure that COVID-19 vaccines are received by everyone in an equitable manner. Working together to end the acute phase of the pandemic is critical to saving lives, revitalizing economies, and getting us back on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and build a safer, healthier world for all. The United Nations, and especially the World Health Organization, are doing everything we can to support COVAX. The Advance Market Commitment is an unprecedented collaboration across the UN system, governments, civil society organizations, and the private sector. COVAX aims to deliver at least 2 billion doses of vaccines in 2021. That means we need to bridge the gap between high-income economies and the rest of the global community. The world will not be safe until everyone is vaccinated. And in that spirit, I call on all governments and partners to support the full funding of the COVAX Advance Market Commitment by raising an additional $2 billion by June 2021. Let's all step up at this pivotal moment, saving lives and investing to end the pandemic and begin the recovery everywhere.
Thank you, Your Excellency and Deputy Secretary General. The AMC's success depends on the highest level of international collaboration, and your support will be crucial in making this happen. Rounding out our introductory remarks, it is my pleasure now to give the floor to José Manuel Barroso, Chair of the Gavi Board, who is co-hosting this event. Professor Barroso, you are joining us today from Portugal. Welcome.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. It's an honor to address you as Chair of the Vaccine Alliance. I'd like to thank the United States for hosting this event, which demonstrates the Biden administration's commitment to U.S. leadership in global health. Secretary Blinken and Acting Administrator Steele, we appreciate your efforts to advance COVAX as the global solution to help end the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. was one of Gavi's 6 original donors and has now become COVAX's largest donor. Set up in a record 6 months, And with huge thanks to all our donors, partners, civil society, fellow agencies, and private sector support, Gavi COVAX is delivering. As we speak, 111 countries, including many in the developing world, have received vaccines through COVAX. Our first priority was to ensure lower-income countries get speedy access to safe and effective vaccines against COVID-19. Thanks to continued global solidarity, this goal is now within reach. Unlike what was happening in previous pandemics, it took us only 83 days from the first COVID-19 vaccine jab in the developed world to the first jab in Africa. But let's be honest, there has been vaccine nationalism, and the world is far, very far, from an equitable distribution of vaccines. We have been facing huge challenges, namely constrained supply and export restrictions. That's why it's important that donors who have surplus doses share them through COVAX as soon as possible. The emergence of new variants has also brought additional challenges in the fight to end the acute phase of the pandemic. The spread of the virus is advancing around the world. Therefore, we need a fully funded Gavi COVAX AMC to accelerate vaccination coverage in lower-income economies. The clock is ticking. We call on the international community to reaffirm its support for COVAX AMC so that we can continue this journey together as one. I thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion today and a successful summit in June. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Barroso. Vaccine policy indeed is economic policy. If quick, equitable access to vaccines is ensured everywhere, it doesn't only save lives and livelihoods, but also helps rebuild shattered economies. In 5 years, $9 trillion could be added to the global economy, and it could be the most powerful economic stimulus measure ever. How did the AMC get to where it is today? To help us understand how the vision for equitable access took hold, I turn now to Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization, which is playing a pivotal role in the global response to COVID-19, not only as a partner in COVAX, but across the whole ACT Accelerator. Following Dr. Tedros, we'll be hearing from Stefan Löfven, Prime Minister of Sweden.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues and friends, I would like to thank the United States and Secretary Blinken for hosting this meeting, and thank you, Gavi, for your partnership during this unprecedented time. From the beginning of the pandemic, we knew that vaccines would be a vital tool for ending it. But we also knew from experience that market forces alone would not deliver equitable distribution of vaccines. That's why WHO, Gavi, CEPI, UNICEF, and other partners have come together under the COVAX umbrella to work for equitable access to vaccines as global public goods for all people, not luxury items for some. COVAX has now delivered almost 40 million doses of vaccines to 110 countries and economies. But it's nowhere near enough. There remains a shocking and expanding disparity in the global distribution of vaccines. Some AMC countries have not received any vaccines. None have received enough, and now some countries are not receiving their second round allocations on time. We need an urgent scale up in financing COVAX, producing vaccines, and sharing doses. We have shown that COVAX works, but to realize its full potential, we need all countries to step up with the political and financial commitments needed to fully fund COVAX and end the pandemic. Because we will not end the pandemic anywhere until we end it everywhere. I thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are at a decisive point in the fight against the pandemic. Vaccination has begun and COVAX has now reached 100 countries. This progress is impressive, but it also shows the importance of COVAX and the work of Gavi, WHO, and partners. Thank you for that. I also want to thank Gavi and the United States for organizing today's launch event for the COVAX AMC investment opportunity. Global access to vaccines is about global solidarity, and global access is in everyone's best interest, because without it, we face an increased risk of dangerous mutations that pose a threat to all countries. Economic recovery will be slower for all countries if even just a few are left behind. And the devastating impacts of the pandemic will continue and threaten decades of hard-won development. Against this background, I am proud to announce today that Sweden is increasing its contribution to COVAX by $260 million to a total of more than $280 million. This makes Sweden the largest contributor so far relative to our population size. We very much hope that other countries will join us in contributing to the Gavi COVAX AMC investment opportunity. Together, we will beat the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. Thank you, Dr. Tedros. And a massive thank you to Sweden for their very generous pledge. This really is a great way to kick off a fundraising campaign. Pleasure to introduce Felix Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Chair of the African Union. After President Tshisekedi, we'll move straight to Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est un honneur pour moi, en tant que président de l'Union africaine et au nom de l'African Union démocratique du Congo, de me joindre au secrétaire d'État américain Anthony Blinken, au professeur Barroso, président du conseil d'administration de Gavi, et à la famille Gavi pour ce lancement du dossier d'investissement COVAX qui garantira la disponibilité des vaccins contre le Covid-19 pour les populations d'Afrique et du monde entier. Je me félicite du fait que nous nous sommes engagés à redoubler d'efforts pour mettre fin à la pandémie de Covid-19 avec les outils de prévention, de diagnostic et de traitement à notre disposition. Et je salue le rôle des travailleurs de santé de première ligne de notre continent. Je suis encouragé par la solidarité exprimée par de nombreux pays pour rééquilibrer les inégalités que nous constatons dans la disponibilité du vaccin contre le Covid-19. J'espère qu'en 2021, les peuples d'Afrique aient le même accès aux vaccins que ceux d'Europe et des États-Unis. J'apprécie la solidarité dont mon pays et l'Afrique ont bénéficié de la part des partenaires du monde entier. La garantie de marché pour les vaccins de Covid-19, le COVAX AMC, qui fournira 2 milliards de doses d'ici la fin de l'année, a permis à ce jour d'introduire ces vaccins dans plus de la moitié des pays africains. J'apprécie également les efforts sans précédent de l'Afrique pour s'assurer que nous faisons partie de la solution et que nous développons nos propres processus. L'équipe spéciale de l'Union africaine d'acquisition de vaccins pour l'Afrique travaille avec diligence.
Africa is working diligently to obtain additional vaccines in order to increase the fair distribution, putting an end to the pandemic as quickly as possible, of contributing to a reduction of risks of new variants, of saving lives, and of rebuilding our economies. In signing the Addis Ababa Declaration, Africa recognized the key role which is played by vaccination in its health of the population and in the economic projects. We cannot leave aside either other infectious diseases which also play a key role in our plan in the RDC. We learned during the Ebola crisis that we need to continue our vaccination efforts against polio, measles, and other avoidable diseases through vaccination. We shouldn't lose the acquired benefits that have been obtained. As head of the African Union, I would call upon my sisters and brothers and our African partners to give priority to health expenditures, to invest in universal health care, and of developing the capacity for the production of vaccines in Africa. Thanks to a strong leadership and increased attention given to the fight against COVID-19 and systematic vaccination, we need to find the levels of vaccination that we had prior to the pandemic, of ensuring a healthy future for all and developing our ability to respond to the next pandemic. Today, Africa must act. I know that together we can do it. We owe it to the peoples of our continent. Thank you.
First, I would like to thank Gavi and the US government for launching this investment opportunity. The COVAX facility has delivered vaccines to more than 100 countries. This demonstrates just how much we can achieve through global collaboration. From research and development by CEPI to allocation and delivery by the World Health Organization and Gavi. We need to speed up vaccination in low and middle income countries. It is essential that countries show leadership and provide full financing for the COVAX AMC as an integral part of Act A. Norway has contributed more than $500 million to Act A, including $141 million to the COVAX AMC. As co-chairs of the Act A Facilitation Council, President Ramaphosa and I have reached out to leaders in this. We are asking each country to contribute its fair share to Act A. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. Together, we can close the funding gap of $22 billion, including $2 billion for COVAX AMC. These numbers may seem high, but they are small compared to the global economic loss of this if this crisis continues. The new viral strains make it clear that we need to move faster. Only by working together can we expand vaccination coverage, increase our pace, and beat the pandemic.
Thank you, everyone, for your remarks on how to bring the vision of the COVAX AMC to life, and for reminding us that the work being done today is built on years of collaboration and partnership. Chizoba Winodi of Women Advocates for Vaccine Access in Nigeria, Dr. Chizoba will remind us of the crucial role civil society plays in the COVAX AMC. But first, let's hear from Sigrid Kaag, the Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation of the Netherlands. Minister, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Excellencies, a year ago we came together facilities and the challenges were enormous, but we managed to join hands in an endeavor to ensure access to COVID-19 vaccines for all countries, rich and poor alike. And since then, we're all pleased that millions of doses have been distributed to more than 100 COVAX countries. However, we all know it's not the time to celebrate success. We're far from there. COVID-19 and the COVAX AMC investment opportunity clearly states that vaccination coverage in 92 low and middle income countries needs to increase rapidly to save lives, prevent illness, and prevent virus mutations that may render current vaccines ineffective. To meet these goals, more vaccine doses, as we've heard many times today, are urgently needed. So the Kingdom of the Netherlands is also increasing its financial support for COVAX AMC by 40 million euros, bringing the total contribution to 70 million euros. Strong national health systems, however, are also essential to ensure that vaccines reach those most in need and to provide testing, treatment, and personal protective equipment. To control and contain COVID-19 worldwide, we need to address all 4 pillars of the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator. The extra support for COVAX AMC is part of a broader package of 52 million euros in additional funding for vaccines and country readiness in support of ACTA, bringing our total investment 50 million euros. It's time to demonstrate our global commitment to our shared humanity, and that time is now.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chizoba Wonodi. Thank you for having me. I have 3 points to make. First is COVAX is important. COVAX is delivering to countries around the world, countries like mine, Nigeria. At the end of February, we received the first shipment of about 4 million doses of the Oxford That has gone a very long way to ensure that frontline workers and older adults are beginning to get vaccinated barely 3 months after the same set of people were beginning to get vaccinated in richer countries. So COVAX is helping to accelerate quicker access to COVID vaccines to countries around the world. But there is more that needs to be done. We expect about 20% of our population will be covered by vaccines shipped by COVAX. And so that brings me to the second point, which is please support COVAX with dollars donation and doses donation, because COVAX is standing tall as that neutral body that is fighting for equitable access to COVID vaccines for people around the world. It is the antidote to vaccine nationalism, to bilateral deals. So we need to really support COVAX in order for it to deliver. The third point is more around the longer term solution or the medium term solution, which is to expand vaccine manufacturing capabilities. There are calls now for temporary suspension of intellectual property rights for vaccine technology. I am calling on rich countries and global leaders to please support that proposal that's on the table. I'm also calling for support for faster technology transfer to companies in low and middle income countries who have existing manufacturing plants that can be repurposed and brought on stream to begin to produce COVID vaccines and help to unblock the current supply bottlenecks that's hampering COVID response efforts across the world, and it will also help to make COVAX deliver faster. Thank you so much.
I'm the Director of Medical Affairs, Kolebu Teaching Hospital, and then the lead of the National COVID-19 Case Management Team. It's been a lot of work trying to mobilize resources and human capacity across the country, across all the treatment centers, to be able to help fight the pandemic. I lost my junior sister to COVID-19 last June. So for me personally, I usually tell my colleagues, I've lived COVID, trying to mobilize resources and capacity to manage COVID in the country, and then personally losing my sister. It was a big, major impact for me and the family as a whole. Now I'm happy, I'm excited that at long last the vaccine is here and is going to impact positively on how the pandemic rolls out subsequently. In the fight against the pandemic, the vaccine has come at the right time. I've been involved in case management. I know what COVID has caused socially, economically, and the loss of lives. Let's take the vaccine to prevent us getting COVID-19, and Ghana will be the better for it. Thank you.
And a big thank you as well to the Netherlands for that donation and all the leaders for their support of a fully funded AMC. Now I'd like to introduce David Malpass, President of the World Bank. The World Bank has been a founding partner of Gavi, which today is playing a key role in providing countries with the means to procure doses through COVAX. Mr. Malpass, thank you for joining us from Washington.
Thank you. Hello, Secretary Blinken, UNDSG Mohammed, Dr. Barroso, Dr. Berkeley, and Excellences. I'm very pleased to be participating today. As a founding partner of Gavi, the World Bank Group is a key partner at the country level in strengthening routine immunization, and we are now partnering with you on the largest vaccination effort in history in order to stop the COVID-19 pandemic. Our goal from the beginning of the vaccination planning effort almost a year ago has been to facilitate a system that can provide the billions of safe vaccinations needed in the near term and lay the groundwork for longer term prevention of COVID. Including our board's approvals tomorrow, the World Bank will have committed $2 billion across 17 countries, with the total expected to reach at least $4 billion in 50 countries by mid-year. This financing can be used by countries to make payments to COVAX, including the purchase of additional doses beyond the COVAX provided 20%, as countries aim for higher levels of coverage. Our financing is available for countries to spend quickly after board approval, often in a matter of days or weeks. It supports vaccine purchases and also supports deployment, the important business of getting shots into arms. For the poor countries, much of the financing is on grant or highly concessional terms. The World Bank is working to further increase our available country financing to use all available resources for the vaccination effort. While COVAX has received financial commitments, accelerated encashment is needed to help COVAX complete the contracting needed to provide its 20% and higher levels. With $4 billion in World Bank funds to be in place by mid-year, we are seeking to purchase through COVAX, especially for the poorer countries, to the extent COVAX has access to supplies. We need to recognize that the supply of vaccines may be an even more binding constraint than the cash flow. Many countries now have dollars available to spend on doses, but rapid deliveries aren't available. I would like to underline here the importance for countries that have the prospect of excess vaccine supplies to release them as soon as possible. Because the capacity to deliver and administer shots is limited, it's imperative that increased supplies begin to flow to developing countries. We also need suppliers, countries, and their development partners to distinguish between contracts, options, letters of intent, best efforts, and memorandum of understandings. These transparency steps are necessary so that financing can be directed more effectively and countries can plan for receipt and deployment of vaccines. They are also critical to enable private sector investments to expand supply over the medium and long term. At IFC, we have a $4 billion global health platform to support efforts to close gaps for essential health equipment and supplies, including vaccines. But effective use of this funding depends on more information about expected supply and demand. We're working intensively on deployment to achieve rapid and safe injection of vaccines. The COVID-19 vaccine campaign will be unlike any prior vaccination effort. The sheer volume of people, doses, locations, and human resources involved in the exercise will challenge the most resilient of systems, and even the best laid vaccine deployment plans will be seriously tested. Our collaboration with Gavi on COVAX and other Act A partners has been strong throughout the crisis and shows how we complement each other's strengths. A robust rollout of vaccines is an integral part of the recovery and can also contribute to future preparedness. We've worked with Gavi, Global Fund, WHO, and UNICEF to help governments assess their readiness. The assessments showed that much more is needed in the medium term to build resilience of health systems. World Bank and MDB financing will play an important role in filling those gaps. The World Bank Group is planning a special focus on the poorest countries and is committed to working with all partners toward rapid, fair, and equitable access to vaccines. Transparency and international cooperation are key elements of the road forward, and we look forward to continuing these vital vaccination efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malpass, for outlining the World Bank's plans in Washington. Our next three leaders remind us of the broad base of support the AMC has built since it was formally launched last June. We're now going to hear from Josep Borrell, High Representative and Vice President of the European Commission, representing Team Europe, Ivan Duque Marquez, President of Colombia, and Othman Durandi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tunisia.
Dear leaders, dear ministers, dear colleagues and friends, thank you for inviting me to join the launch of this new initiative in support of the global rollout of safe and effective vaccines against COVID-19. The title of today's event, One World Protected, translates perfectly well our common goal, getting all citizens vaccinated fast and safely all over the globe. From the outset, the European Union has chosen the path of global cooperation in the fight against the pandemic. We have worked closely with our partners in our neighborhood and around the globe, and it's good to see many here today. The United Nations, the Gavi Alliance, the G7, the G20, the United States, and many others. As the European Union, we have invested 33 billion euros to support the research and development of safe vaccines. We have contributed, European institutions and member states together, with 2.2 billion euros to COVAX, which has resulted in a significant first step with 38 million doses being delivered to more than 100 countries, including 61 among the most vulnerable ones. We have produced and exported 80 million vaccines to 42 third countries. And as Team Europe, institutions plus member states, we have invested 40 billion euros to support our partners to tackle the sanitary, social, and economic consequences of the pandemic and building back better. We are jointly engaged to vaccinate our population, to produce and export vaccine to the rest of the world, and to financially contribute to COVAX. And we will keep this path with all our strength. We are in a race that we can only win together. The virus is our joint enemy. It threatens all of us. It's a global problem, and global problems requires global solutions. This is not a race among international players. This is not a race among us. It's a race against a competitor that does not care about flags or borders. It's not a sprint. We are running a marathon. And each day that goes by, we have less distance ahead to cross the end line and win the race. And the Gavi COVAX Advance Market Commitment will contribute to get there. Will contribute a lot. That we are here. And that's why I thank you a lot for your attention.
Saludo al secretario de Estado de los Estados Unidos, Anthony Blinken, al presidente de la Junta de Gavi, José Manuel Barroso.
Greetings to the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken, to the chair of the Gavi board, José Manuel Barroso, and also to the administration of USAID, Gloria Steele, and everyone else attending this important event. I gladly join in the launch of the investment opportunity document from COVAX Advance Market Commitment. This important document outlines the mechanisms needed for funding to continue to distribute vaccines in the countries we are part of. Similarly, it invites other countries to join in, which is why, other partners, and which is why on this occasion we're celebrating the United States joining COVAX as a contributor and as a promoter of the new financial plan that lays down the mechanisms needs for the year 2021. Many people around the world questioned this tool's effectiveness, but the results speak for themselves. I would like to highlight the fact that in 2020, COVAX raised more than $6 billion through donations from governments, corporations, and philanthropic agencies. It is now clear that the COVAX facility works. It is active, and it will continue to work to help in the fight against the pandemic. Precisely, Colombia is participating in COVAX because we believe in multilateralism as the institutional framework to promote cooperation among countries. As a country, we highlight the fact that we are the first country in America to receive doses of vaccines from the mechanism and the second country in the world. This is something all 50 million Colombians are grateful for because it allows us to move ahead with our national COVID-19 immunization plan. Moreover, we've been remarkably committed to COVAX, bearing in mind we are the only country from the Latin American and Caribbean region that has contributed $500,000 to this tool. With COVAX help will continue to face these challenging times with resilience, accelerating the inclusive and sustainable financial recovery in each of our member states. Thank you very much.
أصحاب الفخامة والمعالي والسعادة.
Excellencies, please allow me at the outset to express our thanks to the International Gavi Alliance and the United States for taking initiative in this meeting to mobilize support for COVAX mechanism and to provide COVID-19 vaccine for middle and low-income countries. In particular, I commend the new U.S. administration for its important contribution to this mechanism for both the current and coming year, hoping that the rest of the country's institutions and individuals who are able to do so will go along the same lines. Mr. President, the concept of common future for mankind has never been more evident than it is today. Due to the health, social, and economic repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic on all our peoples and the inability of any single country to address it in isolation from others. The pandemic's contribution to deepening the manifestation of fragility and disparities between countries and increasing the pain and tragedies of vulnerable groups such as women, girls, children, refugees, displaced persons, the elderly, and people with disabilities has prompted us since the outset to call for the development of the contribution to international peace and security into a comprehensive concept based on solidarity, which was embodied in Resolution 2532, which was adopted on the 1st of July 2020. We have no choice today but to make a quantum leap in order to achieve equal access to effective vaccines and the equitable distribution of the necessary equipment and medical equipment which will help this end this difficult phase that the pandemic has caused in all countries of the world without exception. It has become necessary to strengthen the COVAX mechanism and develop its capabilities not only financial but also through innovative means such as the fair and rapid distribution of vaccine doses to countries and encouraging the assistance of countries capable and willing to manufacture vaccines to enter into partnerships that may help to cope with the spread of this pandemic. The middle and low-income countries that benefit from the COVAX mechanism are placing great hopes on this initiative to come out with practical results that achieve the equitable distribution of vaccines and to establish once again the evidence of our active sharing of the values of solidarity and synergy and our common belief that shared future for mankind in the face of various risks that may afflict humanity as a whole without discrimination. Thank you for listening, and may God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.
Gavi has a long history of working with private sector partners to secure immunization goals. Talking about a new collaboration, let's now turn to Alfred Kelly, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Visa Foundation. Alfred, thank you for joining us today.
The convergence of global health and economic crises in 2020, driven by the COVID-19 pandemic, really levied challenges on businesses, governments, and society. And that requires agility, innovation, and cooperation to stabilize as we move to recovery. Threats like the COVID pandemic know no geographic or sectorial boundaries. As a large engine of commerce, Visa continues to work to bring the world back to business. And we do our part for society where everyone everywhere has access and tools to meaningfully benefit from an interconnected global economy. International public-private partnerships is the best way to stop the spread of COVID and rebuild the economy. That's why Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, is all about, and the reason why the Visa Foundation is proud to partner with Gavi to make COVID-19 vaccinations accessible to developing countries. Today, I'm proud to announce that the Visa Foundation will grant $1.5 million to COVAX Advance Market Commitment, and further, we will match dollar for dollar any contributions made by our employees. The Visa Foundation's mission is to support inclusive economies where individuals, businesses, and communities can thrive. Supporting the COVAX AMC is an effective way to help developing countries resolve the greatest public health and economic challenge of our lifetime. We recognize that there's an underserved community within developing countries where they're bearing a disproportionate burden, which is why the Visa Foundation is also supporting the Civic Nation Made to Save campaign in the United States, which helps Black and Latinx communities have better access to vaccines. From an economic perspective, COVID-19 has really accelerated the adoption of the global commerce in the world. We cannot allow COVID to turbocharge global inequality. Equitable access to COVID-19 vaccinations requires real focus and investment funding. The faster we can procure and distribute safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines, the quicker we can start rebuilding the economies around the world. This is a unique opportunity to align our values with our global response to the pandemic. We heard the call from Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and we hope others do as well. To my friends in the business world, my call to action is simple. Join us in the race against COVID-19. Time is of the essence. Thank you very much.
За надад дөрвөлгийн болромоо гэдэг. Хэцүү юм гэхээр одоо санааны зургаар гараад ах トゥ сад наматан садна бидний нэрч найз нөхдөйгээл нэгнийдээ нэг үүлэн таан далганы сан байгаа нэг ах トゥ хамаатан садна хэр өрчлөлт нь орж гарч явахгүй хэцүү л шүү дээ чинь надад. Зөндөө бэрхшээл гарч яана одоо бидний чинь өвдөн бас gödeni bitmiş için de hotoranız or zulha im komik tokölcü günna maşin doraycı нэг машин эвдэрлээ гэж бодоход нэг дуу мууган ч нэг үлдэм яадаг ч гэдэм. Эдийн засгийн хохирол гэж одоо цар тахад бас багцыг амсж байна. Тэгэхээр чинь бид нар чинь бас 178 сар 7 сарын 2 дээр гээд баяр наадмын үеэр хэдэн малаа очтой бас энэ дэвтэнд бас тодорхой хэмжээний борлуулалт одоо тэр маань бас борлогдохгүй. Яг хүн болон санснаар аваад ирээд аваач чаддаггүй. Яг тиймэрхүү л шүү дээ. Хоригдмол хэцүү л шүү дээ. Өөдч үсрэх ямар мөнгө юм биш чинь ямар байнгын туйх юм шиг вакциндаа хамрагдал байгаа хэрэгслээр аль болж утгахынхаа төлөө вакциндаа хамрахын тулд мөрөж чултгал давхичуучал хийлгэдээс яг уу. Ой сэтгэлдээ ирж байна надад. Хамтдаа нэгэн хүчээр энэ тартахлыг даван дийлж гол нь вакцинтэй идэвхтэй хамрагдаж одоо
And thank you to Alfred Kelly and the Visa Foundation for their pledge to the COVAX AMC. We will soon be joined by Nana Akufo-Addo, the president of Ghana. But before that, let's hear from Henrietta Fore, the executive director of UNICEF, another member of the Vaccine Alliance. UNICEF teams have been working around the clock to make sure vaccines are delivered to those that need them most.
1 year ago, the pandemic brought the world to a standstill, and today we are rolling out the largest global vaccine campaign ever. An incredible accomplishment. UNICEF is proud to be part of this historic mission. Through COVAX, in less than 2 months, we've already helped 100 countries access COVID-19 vaccines. There are no miracles in public health, but this is as close as it gets. Still, we are far from the finish line. Right now, there is far from enough supply to meet the global demand, especially in the most vulnerable countries. Vaccines are concentrated in the hands of the few. Vaccine nationalism threatens us all. New variants are emerging. Health systems are strained, and health workers are exhausted, with many still waiting for their own vaccination. The COVAX AMC is a beacon of hope. It's an effective, realistic way to ensure fair and affordable access to vaccines for all. But getting vaccines off the tarmac and delivered to difficult-to-reach populations requires concerted, coordinated effort and dedicated funding. This event provides a critical investment opportunity for governments and organizations to rally around these needs, and for wealthier countries to act in all of our best interests, including their own, by investing generously and donating surplus doses to the facility, to accelerate delivery, to share doses with countries in need, and to keep this historic mission moving forward, not just as a moral imperative, but as the only pathway to ending this pandemic and getting the global economy back on track. For all of us, the last mile is in sight. Now is the time to aim higher and build the partnerships that can deliver this life-saving vaccine to every person, everywhere.
The world has come a long way since the first case of COVID-19 was recorded. Last week, together, we celebrated the milestone of COVAX delivering vaccines to 100 countries. Not only is this tremendous multilateral effort pulling the world gradually out of the pandemic, but it has also laid the foundation for collaboration against future pandemics. Ghana is proud to be part of this significant multilateral effort, and we will continue to show our commitment through our readiness to deploy life-saving health interventions. Indeed, Ghana is home to the largest drone delivery network anywhere in the world, and this system was the first to be used to deliver COVAX vaccines anywhere in the world. We're using our partnership with Zipline, with support from Gavi and partners, to use drones to deliver COVID-19 vaccines across the Ashanti region in the next phase of the vaccination campaign. And we intend to extend this across other regions as soon as new vaccines become available. We recognize that increased coverage and the presence of resilient health systems will be key to defeating COVID-19 and protecting us in future against such pandemics. That is why we in Ghana are deploying digital identity solutions to guarantee universal health coverage for our people, and working with Gavi to provide transformative innovations that contribute to a more effective healthcare service delivery. The launch of the COVAX AMC investment opportunity is thus an important milestone. Now more than ever, we must commit to ensuring that the COVAX AMC is fully funded to ensure greater coverage for all COVAX AMC economies.
Thank you, President Akufo-Addo, and thank you, Henrietta. Joining us now from Moldova is President Maia Sandu. Madam President, it's so good to have you with us today.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you for the opportunity to address you all here today. Big or small, rich or poor, all the nations are suffering through it together. This is the lesson that COVID-19 taught us all. I'm the President of the Republic of Moldova, a small country of kind and talented people. The pandemic hit us hard. Thankfully, friends came to help. A donation from neighboring Romania allowed us to start the vaccination on March 2nd. Moldova was also the first nation on the continent to receive vaccines via COVAX. We are very grateful for these donations. I personally thank Gavi, SETI, the WHO, UNICEF, that helped set up the COVAX platform, and of course, the generous nations and private donors that support it. Thank you all very much. But we are not there yet. Only 2% of the Moldovans received the first dose of the jab. Donations are not enough, and as a small buyer, it is very difficult for us to procure vaccines directly from the manufacturers. So I would like to ask for your help once again. Firstly, I kindly ask the COVAX board to consider expanding donations to countries like mine beyond the 20% of the national needs. Secondly, help us buy the vaccine. We count on the COVAX cost-sharing mechanism to help us secure direct deals with manufacturers and get fair prices. And we also hope that this mechanism will be able to be used as soon as possible. This pandemic highlighted the inequalities in our global community, but it also showed us that we can overcome it together with solidarity and compassion. The more we help each other, the stronger we become. We count on the COVAX platform and its generous sponsor to continue saving lives. Please keep those donations coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Sandu, for joining us from Moldova. We're now going to hear from Ulysses Correia Silva, Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, followed by Dr. Gerd Muller, the Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany.
A vacinação contra a Covid-19 é uma prioridade.
Well,
thanks to COVAX, Cabo Verde received the first batches of the vaccines. These vaccines empowered our national capacity. 83% of our health professionals and workers were vaccinated, as well as 50% of our fighter fighters and civil protection employees were vaccinated. Vaccination has started for people over 60 of age. The government has plans to vaccinate 70% of the population until this year. And to this, we need to have access to more doses. And we hope to continue to count on the collaborations of Cape Verde's usual partners, and therefore contribute to reestablishing our economy, normalizing our health situation. I wish you well.
Ladies and gentlemen, all countries in the world want to overcome the pandemic. And the best way to do this is a global vaccination campaign. Since the end of February, the first vaccines have been delivered to developing countries through COVAX. This is a great achievement. By providing €2.1 billion, Germany is the biggest donor for COVAX and the accelerator. This accelerator makes it possible to quickly develop and produce COVID-19 vaccines, drugs, and diagnostic and treatment tools, and to distribute them in a fair way. Through COVAX, vaccines can be provided for up to 25% of the people of the world's 92 poorest countries. To support this vaccination campaign, Germany is providing €1 billion this year. For most developing countries, COVAX is the only way to get vaccines. They will need more vaccines, and for this, COVAX needs more pledges. The funding gap is $20 billion. This gap has to be closed quickly. We will either beat the COVID-19 pandemic worldwide or not at all. Thank you so much.
And thanks again, in particular to Germany, which in February became the second biggest sovereign donor to the COVAX AMC. Let's now turn our focus to leaders who have been influential in shaping their organizations' responses to the pandemic. Mauricio Claver Carone, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, joins me now.
Thank you so much, and good morning. And thank you, Secretary Blinken, Chairman Barroso, Administrator Steele, Dr. Berkeley, for this invitation to participate in this critical event alongside so many leaders across countries and sectors. The level of coordination between the leadership represented here today has not just helped to improve lives, but it has saved lives. At the Inter-American Development Bank, our first priority is the sustainable and inclusive economic and social advancement of our 26 borrowing member countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And as such, the pandemic has presented the greatest challenge in our 61-year history. By several measures, our region has been the hardest hit by COVID-19. Of every 100 infections being reported around the world right now, about 21 are from countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have the highest case fatality ratio in the world, and last week was reported to have been the deadliest for Latin America since the pandemic began. And behind the numbers are real lives. The millions who have lost their loved ones, who have lost their businesses, their jobs, and the millions who are now living in poverty. It is our priority to find ways to respond to the need of the region. And vaccines are the single most important intervention for countries to reduce transmission, to reestablish essential services, and reactivate economies and societies. In December, in addition to the $1.2 billion in financing the IDB already dispersed to support countries and their health sectors, we announced the mobilization of up to $1 billion additionally to support our countries in purchasing and distributing the vaccines, including through the COVAX facility. Last fall, we financed advanced payments to the COVAX facility by Argentina, Trinidad and Tobago, Belize, and Ecuador. And for Belize and Ecuador, we've also approved guarantees to backstop their future payments. We are also supporting financial commitments to COVAX in the Bahamas and the Dominican Republic, and we're preparing to do the same in Suriname and Panama. And I want to take a moment here to reiterate our appreciation for the works of everyone involved in the COVAX effort. What you've accomplished in less than a year is truly historic. For the people of our region, the ultimate proof is the delivery of nearly 3 million doses. You've helped the IDB not just improve lives, but to save them across the region. However, we're now seeing that vaccine delivery and deployment in our region is unequal and severely lagging behind the high-income countries. Half of the IDB's borrowing countries remain unable to secure vaccine doses for more than half of their population. And many are concerned about whether the mechanism can meet its regional distribution target for the year. So today, I echo the call for all partners in the international community to redouble their support for COVAX. And I want to reiterate the importance of collaboration and creativity to find ways to support these countries. We must build a framework for action in 2022, 23, and beyond, including sustainable, equitable, and efficient system for deploying or promoting the local production of these vaccines. We can do this together, but not without addressing whether COVAX's mandate should be expanded, without addressing what role regional institutions like PAHO's revolving fund will play, or how financing mechanisms can be engineered to promote more sustainable, resilient, and responsive vaccine supplies. Now, right now is the moment to galvanize the resources and the commitment to start, and you can count on the IDB for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Claver Corone. Now we'll hear from Stan Erck, the CEO of Novavax, and Professor John Nkengasong, Director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
I'm Stan Erck, and I'm President and Chief Executive Officer of Novavax, a global biotechnology company that is headquartered near Washington, D.C. Novavax has a shared commitment with CEPI and with Gavi and all the organizations present today to ensure broad and equitable distribution of vaccines all over the world. With the help of CEPI, early on in this effort, Novavax has been able to advance the development of our COVID vaccine candidate, what we call COV2373, through clinical trials and to scale up manufacturing at a pace that is unprecedented. We now have production capabilities in over 20 facilities scattered around the globe. We have also completed clinical safety and efficacy studies that show that 2373 is effective not only against the original strain of COVID, but against the variant strains that emerged in the UK and in South Africa. Today, we are well on our way to securing regulatory authorizations around the world. Consistent with Novavax's mission to increase global manufacturing capacity and to ensure broad, equitable supply distribution, we have partnered with Serum Institute of India, the world's largest vaccine manufacturer, to accelerate and broaden the potential global impact of our vaccine, making more doses available to those most vulnerable everywhere. We believe that it is vital that the global pandemic response focus on securing more doses for the 92 AMC countries. Today, more than ever, the Gavi COVAX AMC is critical to ending the pandemic. Novavax is proud to partner with all of the COVAX collaborators to do everything we can to make sure affordable vaccines are available to everyone as quickly as possible. The entire world must do it.
Greetings from the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Safe and effective vaccines against COVID-19 remain the only way in which we can hope to end the pandemic, which has been ravaging our lives and livelihoods for more than a year. As Africans, we remain committed to our continental COVID-19 vaccine development and access strategy and its goal to vaccinate at least 60% of the African population with safe and efficacious vaccines against COVID-19. We need to cover a large majority of our population to achieve herd immunity and avoid major outbreaks of COVID-19 in the future. The successful start of COVID-19 vaccine deliveries through the COVAX facility is a critical step towards achieving this goal. The COVAX facility, and in particular, the support provided through the AMC, are helping African Union member states address the two key hurdles on the way to vaccinate equity and access financing. The first deliveries have allowed several African Union member states to start vaccinating their most vulnerable populations. Now we need to ensure that all countries can take the necessary next steps towards vaccinating a significant part of their adult populations. Currently, the gap between the high and low income countries in terms of fully vaccinated persons is still widening. Unless we succeed in closing this gap and closing it quickly, infections and deaths will increase significantly and our economies will continue to be shattered. In addition, planned measures such as the COVID-19 vaccines certificates will cause additional strain on the most vulnerable societies and economies. Finally, unless COVID-19 is contained everywhere, new variants will continue to threaten the progress made through vaccines and other containment measures. Achieving vaccine equity will therefore be necessary to end the fight against COVID-19 globally. The COVAX facility, and especially the AMC, are key drivers in this effort. Thank you for the opportunity.
We've now heard from a range of stakeholders in the AMC, from donor countries to those that are buying doses through COVAX, as well as those able to access doses through the AMC. We've also heard from Gavi's alliance partners and leaders from the private sector. Now it's time to hear from the person who has been one of the driving forces behind the COVAX AMC from its genesis in Davos in January 2020, right through to the present day, where he is at the center of efforts to ensure equitable access to vaccines. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Seth Berkley, the CEO of Gavi. Seth, it's a pleasure to be here with you again. Over to you.
I want to thank the participants for attending and the U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken and the USAID Acting Administrator Gloria Steele for co-hosting with Jose Manuel today. I've long argued that pandemics are an evolutionary certainty and we need to be prepared. We were better prepared, but not enough. We saw a small point outbreak in Wuhan at the end of 2019 grow to the worst global pandemic in more than 100 years. Countries had to respond with non-pharmaceutical interventions, which of course are difficult. And the World Bank has said that as many as 120 million people have been thrown into extreme poverty, reversing the SDG gains. And the overall cost to the global economy was more than $11 trillion. For sub-Saharan Africa, 2020 was the first year in 25 years with negative growth. Now, how did we deal with this? In Davos in 2020, a few weeks after the outbreak began, Richard Hatchett of CEPI and I started discussing how to respond. Using lessons from the 2009 swine flu pandemic, how to bring together the global health landscape, and especially not leaving lower-income economies behind. When the pandemic was declared in March, this became COVAX. Gavi as an alliance brought a comparative advantage. 2 decades of experiencing working side by side with all of the key immunization partners, UNICEF, WHO, the World Bank, civil society, research institutes, industrialized and developing country vaccine manufacturers, and of course, developed and developing countries. Of course, it was not clear if any vaccines would work or how long it would take to figure that out. But regardless, we were hoping to get equitable access on the agenda and minimize bilateral deals in hoarding, as we knew that there would be supply scarcity. So we launched it as a global effort. But work was also needed beyond vaccines. In April, President Macron, Chancellor Merkel, President van der Leyen, and Director General Tedros came together, and the Access to COVID Tools Accelerator was formed, and COVAX was incorporated as the vaccine pillar. By November 2020, it was a formidable coalition. We had 190 economies engaged, and of course, now it's 191 when our co-host, the United States, joined COVAX on the first day of the new Biden administration. With this, we built the architecture necessary to respond. So we're here today to take stock and launch our new investment opportunity for closing the first phase of the COVAX Advance Market Commitment, our instrument to support the 92 lower and lower middle income countries in 2021, and also to look beyond this into 2022. Our original objective, and one that hasn't changed, is to end the acute phase of the pandemic by the end of 2021 through the equitable distribution of vaccine. Of course, what we have to comment on is the remarkable scientific success we've seen. 327 days from the publication of the genetic sequence of this new virus to regulatory authorization of the first vaccine. And we don't just have one vaccine, but 13 vaccines have been authorized in different countries. But to roll out these vaccines globally, many other things had to be invented. We need readiness assessments for countries, ultra-cold chain systems for at least one vaccine, labeling for pandemic products, harmonized regulatory approvals, standardized indemnification and liability language, a no-fault compensation scheme for side effects, and a humanitarian buffer to ensure that truly no one is left behind. The partners have come together to do this in record time, working around the clock. Of course, we started with no dedicated staff and no money to buy vaccines, but donors were generous and allowed us to jumpstart the effort with funds left over from a previous AMC for pneumococcal disease. Once the first dose outside of a clinical trial was given on December 8th in the United Kingdom, and the findings that clinically significant new variants of the virus were appearing, the pressure for doses worldwide has become extreme. COVAX administered its first dose 43 days after this in India, the largest AMC country, where there was local approval for the product from their functional regulatory system, and then 40 days after this in Africa, when the WHO pre-qualification was obtained. Since then, COVAX has shipped to more than 39 million doses to 111 participating economies. I cannot emphasize enough how important early funding, signed agreements, and cash payments are to where we are today and the need to go into the future. To reserve doses, we need advanced purchase agreements that require cash deposits and balance sheet commitments, followed by orders requiring cash for payment. Overall, for COVAX, we have secured access for well over 2 billion doses of vaccine and are in discussions for at least 1 billion more, making us the second largest purchaser in the world. Now, of course, the world has learned. With your help, we delivered these vaccines to developing countries 2.5 times faster, to 8 times the number of countries, and 20 times the volume than during the same time period during the last pandemic, the 2009 swine flu pandemic. But of course, this is not good enough. True equitable access would have meant availability at the same time. But we've been fighting vaccine nationalism, export controls, vaccine diplomacy, and the challenges to manufacturing scale-up. Our largest supplier has had to divert COVAX doses to deal with a severe outbreak in their country. These challenges have led to an unfortunate delay in our ambitious rollout plans, but we will still get there. Because there's no question, we must prioritize coverage of health workers in every country, then other high-risk groups, while also working to increase volumes given the country demand. Working with industry, with the financing we have available, we're in a position to deliver 1.3 billion doses for AMC countries. But if we have more financing available, we can extend coverage to about half of the adults by exercising options on another 500 million doses to increase this to 1.8 billion doses for AMC countries. And whilst the COVAX Manufacturing Task Force is looking to expand manufacturing to every conceivable manufacturer through tech transfer, we have to acknowledge that it is unlikely to be much more supply in 2021 beyond the doses we have reserved. But we also have to be prepared with doses for the beginning of 2022, as well as to supply new variant vaccines if they are required. Now, of course, there are many questions still around the science. How long does vaccine-induced protection last? How about natural immunity protection? All of these vaccines control severe disease and prevent deaths, but do they reduce transmission, and if so, by how much? Will we need to increase vaccine coverage substantially, switch to new vaccines, or provide variant-specific boosters? Hopefully, many of these science questions will be answered soon, but in the meantime, we know we will need additional finance to purchase additional vaccines, whatever the scenarios. Now, global supply is incredibly tight right now, but we also know that many high-income countries have ordered more vaccines than they need, as it was unknown which would work. Sharing these doses can supplement the doses purchased by COVAX, providing these equitably and as soon as possible to cover the high-risk populations during this supply-constrained period will be most useful in the pursuit of equity and ending the pandemic. And we have to plan despite the uncertainties. We will hold an AMC summit to look at lessons learned and future directions in June around the one-year anniversary of the Global Vaccine Summit where the AMC was launched. This will be an opportunity to plan for the second phase of the AMC in 2022 and beyond. In the Investment Opportunity Report, we begin to frame some of the hypothetical scenarios for 2022. Will we just want to increase coverage to the adult population? Will we need to provide boosters to those at high risk, provide variant boosters in selected geographies? And as we plan for the future, we will want to return to some of our normal principles of country co-financing, look at innovative financing mechanisms, and how we can work better with other financiers, such as the MDBs, to supplement the financing of countries and our generous donors. Investment Opportunity sets out some key areas of lessons learned, even in the short time we've been operating. One theme is the trade-off between speed, volume, price, and diversification. But most importantly, we learned that had we had contingent funding available, we could have locked up doses more quickly. It also means having a higher risk tolerance because earlier investments equal greater security of supply and delivery forecasting, which would improve predictability and save lives. So together with you, we have built an architecture to address future pandemics. As a living network, it can continue to use its skills to improve existing vaccination programs, but with additional surge capacity and contingent finance, it can be ready to provide vaccines for the next outbreak. And it is an evolutionary certainty that there will be a next one. Now, I know how much we ask of you, but we urgently need commitments of a further $2 billion from donors and $1 billion from countries supported by multilateral development banks. Included in the $2 billion, we ask for $150 million from the private sector, and of course, IFM is available as an important front-loading instrument for sovereigns. I hope the rationale is crystal clear. We must all pull together because we cannot afford to fail. Leaving any countries behind just gives the virus more of a chance to mutate and increase the threat to all countries and doesn't allow the world to recover. We are only safe if we are all safe. Let us respond to the challenge at hand and prepare for the next one. We must, as one world protected. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Seth. Presentation provided a stark reminder that if the pandemic continues anywhere, it continues to be a threat everywhere. The message is clear. At least $2 billion is urgently needed for the COVAX AMC by June. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on this. With continued global solidarity, a total of 1.8 billion doses provided by COVAX could be within reach. This would allow lower-income countries to cover substantial portions of their populations and give a much better chance of bringing the pandemic under control. The health, social, and economic impact of COVID-19 has been most devastating for poor and marginalized populations. I'm joined now by Anuradha Gupta, Deputy CEO of Gavi, Lubna Hashmat from the Civil Society Human and Institutional Development Program in Pakistan, and Honorable Dr. Nadiru Hamed, Mauritanian Minister of Health. First, let's now turn to Anuradha to reflect on why vaccinations will ensure the most impacted populations are not left behind.
Thanks, Jen. The issue of equity is indeed a profound one. The shock waves of COVID-19 have been seismic and particularly excruciating for those who already live on the margins, losing lives and livelihoods, lacking access to health care and other essential services, children dropping out of school, young girls falling prey to sexual abuse or early marriage. The knock-on impact on childhood vaccination in lower-income countries and vulnerable populations has been devastating, with millions of children missing out on timely, life-saving immunization. There is grave risk of a very sharp increase in infectious diseases, deaths, and medical impoverishment. Therefore, it is imperative that we shape our COVID-19 response as an opportunity to achieve better equity and social justice. The unprecedented scale of COVID-19 vaccination and COVAX humanitarian buffer that Gavi has set up offer us a unique chance to focus on those people who live in fragile, conflict, humanitarian settings. This is also an opportunity to reach those zero-dose children who do not receive even a single vaccine shot and account for 50% of child deaths that can be so easily prevented with the use of vaccines. Zero-dose children embody communities that face compounded vulnerability, poverty, gender barriers, stigmatization, low access to sanitation, water, hygiene. Unfortunately, these communities are hardest hit by lockdown restrictions and economic slowdown. And ironically, they are the ones unable to maintain any social or physical distancing because of the overcrowded spaces that they often live or work in. An effective COVID response will have to take into account the reality and needs of these communities. It is heartening to see strong global commitment to equity, and we are hopeful that it would be matched by urgent, resolute action at country and community level, which is so vital to success.
Thank you, Anuradha, for explaining the impact the virus is having on the most vulnerable communities. I'm delighted that we can also welcome now Honorable Dr. Nadiru Hamed, Mauritanian Minister of Health, to provide a country perspective, and Lubna Hashmat from the Civil Society Human and Institutional Program in Pakistan. Lubna, may I turn to you first to share your reflections?
Thank you, Jen. So I would like to share the World House that 9.6 million zero-dose children live on the earth today. About 50% of them live in fragile settings, and the remaining 50% are scattered in multiple settings, such as urban slums or hard-to-reach areas or invisible pockets of low and middle-income countries. In these settings, living conditions are volatile, life threats are high, food scarcity is common, and access to health services, especially immunization, is weak. Due to ban on inland movements and lockdown restrictions, confinements are common. Opportunities for livelihoods have got very, very limited. COVID-19 pandemic has proven that virus does not follow any immigration rules. It transmits with high intensity and leaves disastrous impacts on everyone, but it hits most the vulnerable population in the form of acute illness or death. The high number of zero-dose children in these locations pose a bigger challenge, the outbreak of vaccine-preventable diseases. The pandemic has exposed that regardless of the income levels, the countries of the world are not ready for managing sudden high-scale pandemic. Although COVID-19 has become a threat for everyone, but it provides us an opportunity as well. We need to look at that how we can know the scale and geolocations of vulnerable population so that preventive strategies can be drawn and implemented. Most of the countries are assisted to prepare evidence-based national deployment and vaccination plans, especially for inclusion of vulnerable population. We can easily plug in childhood vaccination plans as well. If countries are making efforts for improving capacity of their health systems, why can't we do it holistically for improving the system for covering zero dose and childhood immunization at large? The experience has taught us that regardless of low and middle income status at the country level, we can monitor the spread of deadly virus. And if we publish the data for the sensitization of common people, it raises high level of awareness. This practice can be replicated for covering zero-dose children as well. Innovations are required, not only for vaccines, but also for demand generation for all vaccine-preventable diseases as the world context have changed. Let us come forward and strive for building better, protecting better, regardless of any difference at nationality, religion, gender, or ethnicity, or any other difference. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Lubna, for speaking about those possibilities. And now we turn to you, Honourable Minister, for your thoughts.
Merci.
Thank you very much for this invitation. Mauritania has suffered from the impact of March and then a new surge in May, but adapted day by day, which was the main lesson that we learned from the response to COVID. Second key point to note, Mauritania has tried to develop measures to prevent the pandemic and take into account the specificities of our vulnerable populations. And we never taken drastic measures to the poorest populations, but this did enable us to have a significant impact on most vulnerable populations. Third point was that COVID was an opportunity for the health system, and a rapid reinforcement was carried out in three key approaches. Medical transport. We live in a country of 1 million square kilometers, 4 million inhabitants. The scattering of the population, medical transport is essential. Second is reanimation, which was strongly reinforced. And third was precisely vaccination, so as to not have any negative impact on the vaccination of children. In this context, I would like to point out that although we are currently working on COVID vaccination, we've introduced a few weeks ago the HPV vaccine for young ladies. We are now going to implement COVID vaccination, and we were first working at the capital and then moving into the rest of the country, taking advantage of the COVID vaccination at the rural level, precisely to reach areas that are far more remote. Peri-urban areas are easily accessible, but in remote areas it is more difficult, and where we're going to combine COVID vaccination with research and vaccination of other doses. One of the strategies we've developed in this respect The penultimate element was that Mauritania was amongst the first countries to join the COVAX initiative, and that we are waiting for the first arrival of the vaccine, COVAX vaccines. And COVID has been a key opportunity for the government to put greater priority on health and also to reconsider the country's economy, which are agriculture, livestock, and fishing, which are the most significant and which benefit the poorest populations overall. We feel that the epidemic, in health terms, was fairly well controlled. Out of a total of 17,000 cases at the most, we had 400 deaths, and we think that these are results which are fairly satisfactory. We hope the third wave, which will appear, will be better controlled than the second in the light of the experience acquired. Now coming back to vaccination, to say that we feel that the COVAX initiative must give assistance to the poorest countries in the strengthening of the cold chain, which are two aspects that have had a negative impact as the country's economy was suffered from a negative impact. And fewer means, in fact, now than we had at the time, even if vaccination remains the key priority for the government. Thank you.
Rada, have you any closing reflections?
Sure, Jen. It is evident that long-term effects of this pandemic are hard to fathom at this stage. However, what we already know is very grim. 150 million more people would be pushed into extreme poverty by the end of this year. 2 million more children could die within a span of 12 months. That is why equity in both COVAX and Gavi 5.0 is of paramount importance, providing vaccines to those who need their protection the most. There is an opportunity to rise like a phoenix, to build back better, more equal, more inclusive, more resilient. This summit is a watershed moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anuradha Gupta, Lubna Hashmat, and Honorable Minister. We're now moving on to discussion with vaccine manufacturers. Scaling up global manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines is right at the heart of efforts to end the pandemic. I'm here with two leaders to hear what they are doing to make sure we get vaccines to the people that need them as quickly as possible. Joining me, we have Mahima Datla, Managing Director of BioE, and Pascal Soriot, Chief Executive Officer of AstraZeneca. Mahima Datla, thank you for joining us today. Your company, BioE, is one of the world's largest vaccine manufacturers. When do you expect to start distributing vaccines?
Thank you for that question. Towards the later part of this year, as you know, we've been working furiously to scale up and manufacture two vaccines. One is our own subunit protein vaccine, and the second is in collaboration with Janssen to manufacture their vaccines. And we expect them to both come online towards the end of the year. And so far, we believe we're on target to produce about 1 billion doses of vaccines.
We know there's going to be intense demand for these vaccines. So what steps have you taken to ensure you'll be able to meet that demand?
So first of all, we had several things working to our advantage. The first thing was we were able to repurpose a lot of the large-scale manufacturing facilities that were already existing without impacting routine immunization. So that enabled us to quickly expand to be able to take in different platform technologies and expand those into large-scale manufacturing. Having said that, we started planning very early on in terms of ordering critical raw materials and consumables. And we had the ability to expand our fill finish capacities because we just embarked on an expansion pre-COVID, not anticipating that it would be needed so quickly. But that enabled us to quickly expand fill finish infrastructure because we had the infrastructure for clean utilities and the shells so we could rapidly deploy equipments. Having said that, right now it's a huge challenge to access consumables, particularly single-use technologies and other consumables, not just for COVID vaccines, but for routine vaccines as well. And this is a problem that needs to get solved in the near future.
Thank you, Mahima. Pascal Sorio, thank you as well for joining us today. AstraZeneca's vaccine, as we all know, was jointly developed by the University of Oxford. It's one of the earliest to receive approval and has already been distributed to 113 countries. What lessons can you share from your experiences so far?
Thank you, Jen. It's really a pleasure to be here today with Mahima. And I would like to thank the US government and Gavi for hosting this important event and also for their leadership throughout this crisis. When we started with Oxford last year, we immediately identified that this would be something we needed to do on a global basis and at no profit, so we could maximize the access to this vaccine. And we've worked, just like Mahima described, we've also worked furiously over the last number of months to get this vaccine to where it is today. We are very, very proud to have delivered 38 million doses to COVAX so far. And in the first quarter, we delivered 200 million doses of vaccines globally together with our various partners. A substantial proportion of these doses went to India, but also many other countries around the world. And as I just said, COVAX, and we've been able to distribute to more than 100 countries around the world. And the big learning here has been the importance of public-private partnership, working together with governments and academia and partners, and building a network around the world of partners that enabled us to maximize the capacity. It's been not only an R&D challenge, it's been very much a manufacturing challenge. And we've had bumps on the road. Of course, it's not going to be very simple, but we still were able to deliver very large quantities of vaccine in the first quarter, and our manufacturing is ramping up very quickly now.
Pascal, you made a commitment early in the pandemic to have a flat, low price for your vaccines. Have you been able to convince so far your investors that this is the right thing to do and also a smart thing to do?
I think the short answer is yes, actually. And our investors, first of all, realize the importance of dealing with this pandemic and controlling it, just simply as human beings, because they realize we need to do something. But on top of it, there are of course investors in the broader stock market, and they do realize that controlling the disease on a global basis is absolutely indispensable to restart economies, and essentially it will benefit everybody who is investing in the global economy. And I think everybody understands very well the need to give access to as many people as possible around the world for two reasons. First of all, it's really the fair and equitable thing to do, and that's really why we, from the beginning, decided to do this. But also because, quite frankly, if we leave entire portions of the global population exposed to the virus, it will give the virus a chance to mutate and then come back to the rest of the world that is vaccinated with mutations that may require evolution of the vaccines. So I think really, yes, the answer is everybody understands very well the need to give access at as low a price as possible to as many people as possible around the world.
Pascal, as you know, in addition to buying the doses directly from manufacturers, COVAX is also interested in donated doses from countries that actually have more coverage, more than they need, so coverage can be boosted in the lower income countries. How can companies such as AstraZeneca help to free up these doses?
Well, I would really encourage the countries indeed to donate some of their doses. And of course, we understand fully that countries have a priority to their population. And that has played out very clearly over the last number of weeks and months. As soon as possible, every country should be giving access to some of their doses to the rest of the world. The way we have addressed that ourselves is by sub-licensing and transferring our technology to partners. We have a partner in India called Serum Institute. And as Mahima said a minute ago, she is manufacturing the J&J vaccine on top of her own vaccine. Serum is manufacturing our vaccine in India and also for COVAX. So, we've done our very best with many partners in India, in Brazil, in Russia, in China, in Japan. And we hope that countries that are getting to a stage where they have enough for their population will rapidly share what they have.
Thank you, Pascal. And quickly, just to ask you both, what commitment can the attendees at this event expect from you to COVAX? Mahima.
So to start off with is a commitment of capacity and to be able to deliver very high capacities. And, in keeping with the legacy of the company, we hope that this will be distributed equitably across the world. We did this with the pentavalent vaccine, and we have no reason to believe things will be different for COVID, at least from our perspective. And we hope together we can overcome any challenges related to export constraints and so on and so forth. The other thing we would commit is, some of our platform technologies allow us the ability to pass on the benefits of not just scale, but the funding that we've received from both the Gates Foundation, CEPI, and the Government of India's COVID Suraksha program. So we would design our access to ensure that we pass on the benefits of these to countries that need them. We've been in business for 60 years and have seen how important it was for countries to introduce HIB into their routine programs because access or affordability is such an important issue, and it's never been more prominent than in the context of COVID. So we as a company will do everything in our power to make sure that we make it as accessible as possible.
Thank you, Mahima. And Pascal, the same question to you. What commitment can attendees expect from you to COVAX?
Well, our commitment is to continue trying to give access to as many people as possible around the world at no profit. And we're definitely committed to supplying COVAX as we committed from the very beginning, and we're working with our partner Serum Institute to do that. And we have many other partners around the world, as I said. I think it is important to realize that the COVAX mechanism is really critical, and we need to reinforce it for the future. I hope we will not experience a similar crisis anytime soon, but definitely for today and for the future, COVAX is a fundamental mechanism. I would ask also, the countries to continue, of course, funding COVAX. It's a question of money, but it's not only a question of money. I think it is important to keep borders open. We've seen challenges. I think Seth a minute ago mentioned that some of the border controls have created challenges for COVAX. And finally, I would also hope that everybody can take a long-term view. We've seen in this crisis that capacity is a fundamental issue. Developing vaccine is not only an R&D challenge, it's also a manufacturing challenge. A year ago, we had 300 or 200 vaccines in development in laboratories. And today we have a few, but the challenge has become a manufacturing one. So building capacity, critical capacity for the future, I think is key. And I would hope that we can work with countries around the world to get this done.
Pascal Soriot, CEO of AstraZeneca, and Mahima Datla, Managing Director of BioE, thank you so much for joining us. And as we have heard, the expansion in vaccine manufacturing is unprecedented in history. All supply chains are stretched. This affects not only COVID-19 vaccines, as we were hearing, but also potentially other critical vaccine programs. So now we'll speak about innovation and partnership, which have been at the heart of Gavi's work for 21 years. We're going to hear from some old friends and some new ones, and how the most cutting-edge technologies will be brought to bear to help the AMC achieve its goal. First, Gargi Ghosh, the President of Global Policy and Advocacy at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then Nayib Bukele, the President of El Salvador.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We stand at a pivotal point in our response against the COVID-19 pandemic. A year ago, we were unsure if or when we would have a vaccine for COVID-19. Today, we have multiple, and millions of doses have been delivered. Scientists, academia, pharmaceutical, and biotechnology companies showed great ingenuity and collaboration to develop vaccines at record speed. Governments and civil society made vaccination a priority. Multilateral organizations, including key partners that make up the ACT Accelerator, like WHO, UNICEF, the World Bank, CEPI, and Gavi, deserve great credit. The fact is, COVID-19 vaccines are reaching the farthest corners of the world far more rapidly than we have historically reached global populations with life-saving interventions. This is great news. But we can't ignore the striking inequities of the moment with regard to these vaccines. Too many at-risk people across the world have yet to receive a shot. This truly is an opportunity to stand as one world protected. What do we need to do to promote real equity before new variants threaten progress further? Funding is, of course, vital, and the world is showing tremendous commitment to making sure financing is not a barrier to access. We need to complete that job. Many high-income countries have also reserved more vaccines than they will need to vaccinate their own populations. I encourage countries to commit as soon as possible to share doses to help ensure equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. Gavi's COVAX Advance Market Commitment facility can play a critical role in that process. And we're also going to need longer-term manufacturing solutions, like building capacity via distributed networks, so that manufacturing is not concentrated in just a few countries. Private sector partners have a critical role to play as well. Up to $48 million of private sector financial contributions to the COVAX AMC will be matched by funding to Gavi from the Gates Foundation and Gates Philanthropy Partners to support COVID-19 vaccine procurement and delivery. Lastly, we need to pay special attention to women, traditionally marginalized populations, and other vulnerable groups. They have borne the disproportionate brunt of the pandemic, and they need to be front and center in the recovery. It's my profound hope that in a year, we will celebrate global access to COVID-19 vaccines the same way we've celebrated their development. Thank you.
To continue combating this pandemic, it is essential to fund the COVAX facility to be able to vaccinate the whole population of the world. Lives of billions of people depend on it. Vaccinations in developing countries cannot depend on the will of some world power. It's the responsibility of all of us. We can all do our part through voluntary crowdfunding, coordinating a small organization, or even putting pressure on large organizations within and world powers to do their part. We won't be able to leave this pandemic behind if we don't vaccinate the entire world population. That, of course, includes developing countries. If we all come together, we'll be able to look back and see we came out of this pandemic not just because we experienced it, but because we came together to move forward. By doing that, we will be making history.
Melinda Gates Foundation for their pledge. And now we'll turn to Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Singapore. Maurice Payne, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Australia, will follow.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Gavi Board Chair Jose Manuel Barroso, Excellencies, I thank the United States and Gavi for co-hosting the launch of the investment opportunity for the Gavi COVAX Advance Market Commitment, or AMC for short. The COVAX facility has delivered more than 38 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to over 100 participants so far. Singapore welcomes the United States' return to the WHO, as well as its strong support for and contributions to the COVAX facility. This strong commitment to multilateralism will be crucial to ensure a quick global recovery from the pandemic. To eradicate the pandemic, we need vaccine multilateralism, a term first mentioned by my Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong in June last year. The COVAX AMC is absolutely essential to ensure that no one is left behind in our fight against COVID-19. Singapore is proud to be amongst the donors to the COVAX AMC and to co-chair the informal Friends of the COVAX Facility Group with Switzerland. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an unprecedented stress test for the multilateral system. Let us continue to work together, including through supporting the COVAX facility and the COVAX AMC, to emerge from this global challenge stronger and more resilient. Thank you.
I want to thank the US administration and Gavi for bringing us together. The global health, social and economic challenges of the pandemic are putting us all to the test. Australia is pleased to be working with global partners to achieve equitable access to safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines for everyone. The world has moved at pace to develop safe and effective vaccines. The challenge before all of us is to ensure that we follow through on our commitments. Australia strongly supports the essential work of COVAX to pool global resources, fast-track vaccines, and to overcome the very significant logistical challenges associated with distributing COVID-19 vaccines. Over 100 countries now have early access to life-saving COVID-19 vaccines through COVAX. We thank the dedicated healthcare workers who are undertaking the world's largest ever vaccination rollout. Australia has made a strong commitment to partnering with our neighbours in the Pacific and Southeast Asia to respond to their identified priorities and health requirements with end-to-end vaccine support. We're doing this in close cooperation with civil society, drawing on their expertise and their networks. Our $80 million Australian contribution to the COVAX Advance Market Commitment is in addition to our $523 million Regional Vaccines Initiative and our $100 million commitment to the Quad Partnership on Indo-Pacific vaccines. We are very pleased to see COVAX vaccines delivered to our friends in Papua New Guinea this week and other parts of the Pacific. The situation in Papua New Guinea is critical, and the arrival of these doses will save lives. COVAX gives countries access to safe and effective vaccines that have had stringent regulatory authority approval. Developed nations sharing doses with the world's most vulnerable is key to ending the acute phase of the pandemic. The test before us is to ensure that all countries have early access to safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines, and COVAX is central to that endeavour.
Many thanks. Now let's go live to Madrid to the Spanish Minister for Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation, Arantxa González Laya. Thank you very much for joining us.
It is a pleasure to join you today. We are in the midst of a global pandemic, and we know that the only way out is through global solidarity. This is why we very warmly welcome the United States joining all of us in this endeavor. A lot has been achieved in this very short period of time, and we should be proud of that. We have been able to gather financing in order to discover vaccines, to scale the production and to start vaccination. Spain very gladly contributed to the setting up of the ACTA initiative and very early on financed COVAX, both nationally as well as through the European Commission, 2.2 billion euro contribution to this initiative. But we know that even if a lot has been achieved in such a short period of time, more needs to happen. First, we need to produce more vaccines, and we need to deliver more, in particular, to countries in the south. And for that, we need more financing, which is why Spain will be adding contributions to the AMC and to COVAX. We also need to see a scale in production, for which we need to work hand in hand with the pharmaceutical companies in a public-private partnership, and we have to explore fully the flexibilities offered to all of us in the international rules on intellectual property. But as we do that, we should also look at the broader context. That's not enough to ensure that vaccines reach our citizens. We need to strengthen local healthcare systems, and we also need to ensure that we eradicate poverty much more forcefully. If we do all of this, the efforts would have been worthwhile at safeguarding lives. Certainly, this is the commitment from Madrid, from Spain. The only way out is international solidarity. The only way out is a multilateral response. Count on Spain to do that.
Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us live from Madrid. Bringing an end to the COVID-19 pandemic is, of course, the most pressing challenge of our time. And while there are plenty of exciting developments ahead, it's also great to see how technology and innovation are playing a key role in beating COVID-19. With this in mind, let's look at how private sector partners respond to this challenge. We will soon hear from Jane Fraser, CEO of Citigroup, and Dr. Karen DeSalvo, Chief Health Officer of Google Health. But first, let's hear from Dr. Abdullah Al-Rabia, the Supervisor General of the King Salman Center for Relief and Humanitarian Aid in Saudi Arabia.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. As we live this unfortunate pandemic, COVID-19, the world has become under many health, economic, and many other challenges. This has shown the importance of global unity to control the pandemic. During 2020, Saudi Arabia has hosted the G20 summit and supports the global fight against the pandemic and contributed $500 million to support the global control of the pandemic and vaccine production and distribution. To date, Saudi Arabia has invested more than $713 million to help control of the global pandemic and also to enable countries in need against the fight of the pandemic. As we move forward as members of the COVAX Gavi initiative, we are still far from reaching our goals and objectives to address our mandate. This puts more pressure on us to review global vaccine production, distribution, and export restrictions, all of which contradict our mission. Thank you.
Secretary Blinken, Dr. Seth Berkley, representatives from CEPI, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and honored delegates from donor countries. I have to tell you, it's been a tremendous honor to serve as the financial and risk advisor to Gavi and the COVAX facility over the past 6 months. Our team has worked daily hand in hand with Gavi to provide comprehensive advice to support the critical and urgent COVAX mission. We've done so with great pride because we believe in the importance of the fair and equitable vaccine distribution for the world so that we can all soon be safe. That said, from the private sector perspective, given the unfolding dangers of variants, speed and greater supply could not be more important, and thus your effort today is on all of our minds. So we wish you very well, and we thank you very much indeed for allowing Citi to contribute to this historic effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Secretary Blinken, Dr. Berkley, and Chairperson Barroso, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to participate in the One World Protected Summit. I'm proud to be here representing Google and honored to be part of this esteemed group of leaders who are committed to transforming global access to a COVID-19 vaccine. As has been said, with this pandemic, no one is safe until everyone is safe. The work Gavi is leading to procure and deliver vaccines to the world's most vulnerable is as important as ever. We're excited to play our part. Today, in support of Gavi's critical efforts, we're announcing plans to help advance global vaccine equity. First, Google is supporting bringing vaccines to people in low and middle income countries. We'll start with funds from google.org to cover 250,000 vaccinations. We're also kicking off an employee giving campaign to donate additional funds which google.org and Gavi will match. Second, Google is promoting authoritative information to address confidence and misinformation through $15 million in ad grants to support Gavi-led campaigns. Since February, Gavi served over 15 million public service announcements via this program. That's 500,000 a day in more than 175 countries worldwide. We're excited to increase our support to Gavi to expand their impact. Third, Google is advancing Gavi's innovation agenda via technical assistance from our employees so we can help accelerate global distribution of vaccines. It's been incredible to see how quickly science has been able to develop safe and effective vaccines. Now, it's our turn to ensure that everyone gets access to them. Google stands ready to do our part, and we encourage others to do theirs. Thank you.
Je suis médecin pédiatre, donc depuis.
I'm a pediatrician and a physician for over 20. It was a situation it was a bit strange, as if life suddenly stopped brutally, a crisis which doesn't say its name. You rarely see patients that come to the hospital, and sometimes this is somewhat disruptive. They don't have enough resources, which promotes self-medication, more particularly antibiotics. We need to return to a normal life. We need to visit friends without fear. We need to play basketball, football, go to games rooms, festival halls, without fearing coronavirus. If we vaccinate the whole population, or at least the most vulnerable, and health workers, the elderly, or people at risk, the DRC can succeed in breaking the transmission chain of COVID.
Thank you.
Merci, Dr. De Salvo, de cet engagement, et merci, Groupe City, pour votre appui. Et maintenant, le Premier ministre de Nouvelle-Zélande, Henrik Marsuti, ministre des Affaires étrangères d'Indonésie, ministre de la Coopération au Danemark, et Marina Serini, vice-ministre des Affaires étrangères et coopération internationale en Italie. Nous sommes en train de lancer une nouvelle possibilité, d'une nouvelle.
Especially like to recognize the support and leadership of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Gavi Board Chair Jose Manuel Barroso. It's just over a year since the emergence of the COVID-19 virus. We now have safe and effective vaccines to protect us against COVID-19 and set us on the path back to healthy communities and thriving economies. And in the COVAX facility, we have a successful global mechanism for delivering the vaccine to all corners of the world. For this, I'd like to express my enormous gratitude and admiration to everyone, from researchers and vaccine companies to governments, multilateral organisations and civil society, who have worked so generously in the spirit of partnership and pragmatism to get us to this point. In particular, the Gavi team, led by Seth Berkley, who has worked tirelessly to develop the COVAX facility at impressive speed. We welcome efforts to provide more doses of the vaccines for developing countries and accelerate global recovery. As an international community, we need to do all we can to increase the supply of vaccines. This includes keeping global supply chains open so that vaccine manufacturing can operate as efficiently and effectively as possible. Dose sharing can also help us to make the best use of available vaccines. Where countries have extra doses, the COVAX facility provides an efficient and equitable way to share doses with others. Today, I'm pleased to announce that in addition to our 17 million New Zealand dollar contribution, New Zealand will also donate enough COVID-19 vaccines for more than 800,000 people to the COVAX AMC. These doses are fully funded, and will increase the number of vaccine doses available to developing countries. We hope that this contribution will help us to achieve greater population coverage globally, including in the Pacific region. In New Zealand, we've been tackling COVID-19 collectively as the team of 5 million. Now we need to act globally as the team of 7.8 billion to roll out vaccines to all. Me mahi tahi tātou mō te oranga o te katoa. We should work together for the well-being of everyone. Noho ora mai rā. Stay well.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, one protected world can only be achieved by ensuring equitable access to COVID-19 vaccine for all. The delivery of 38 million COVAX vaccine to over 100 countries in 6 continents is one step closer toward this goal. This delivery is also proof that multilateralism delivers. However, the end of the pandemic is still far from over, as vaccine global divide still loom large. Almost 1 in 4 people have received COVID-19 vaccine in high-income countries, while in low-income countries, only 1 in more than 500 people. Vaccine provides hope, a silver bullet to slay COVID-19, but they can also prolong the pandemic if the world does not stand together. We are still in a race against time in our battle against COVID-19 as one unity. Therefore, countries should come together to reject vaccine nationalism, refrain from vaccine stockpiling, and diminish politicization of vaccine that fuels greater geopolitical divide. Vaccine multilateralism must triumph over vaccine nationalism. The COVAX facility needs support from all of us, and each country has the responsibility to secure equitable access to vaccine for all. And going forward, we must be bold in our commitment and our actions to ensure time delivery of vaccines, unimpeded distribution of vaccine, and necessary support for scaling up of vaccine production. It is not only our moral duty to see this through, but it is our common interest to bolster efforts to keep everyone safe. Global solidarity must prevail. I thank you very much.
Dear friends, thanks to the US State Secretary Blinken and to Dr. Berkeley for this timely initiative. Denmark strongly appreciates the global solidarity and leadership demonstrated by the US administration. The pandemic has had devastating impact on health, poverty, and gender equality. International collective action is urgent, not least when it comes to securing vaccines for all. No one is safe until everyone is safe. Denmark has already contributed to the COVAX AMC. Today, I'm happy to announce that Denmark will double our support by contributing another $8 million. In addition to the support to COVAX, Denmark will soon announce our 4th COVID-19 response package of almost $65 million. We will support infrastructure and distributing the COVID-19 diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines in developing countries. We will also support stronger health system. Better resilience to future health crises must be joint priority, not least in conflict and fragile settings. Thank you.
Dear colleagues and friends, at the outset, allow me to thank the United States government and Gavi for inviting Italy to take part in the COVAX AMC One World Protected event to launch a new investment opportunity. A year ago, we united against the common threat posed by the pandemic. We collectively created the ACT Accelerator to ensure universal and equitable distribution of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. We established the COVAX facility, which we believe remains the best tool at the disposal of the international community to conduct a worldwide vaccination campaign, especially in low and middle income countries. Immunization must be seen as a global public good, and we must live up to the promise not to leave anyone behind, especially the most vulnerable. Italy has been, from the beginning, a strenuous supporter of a multilateral response to this crisis. We have advocated the strengthening of the global health architecture centered around all the relevant actors such as Gavi, WHO, CEPI, and others. We are heartened to see the United States' renewed commitment to the multilateral health system and invite other countries that have not yet done so to join these collective efforts. We are glad to see that COVAX facility has delivered 38 million doses to more than 100 countries and economies. A great deal has been achieved, but more, much more remains to be done. The pandemic is not over yet, and an additional collective effort is required of all of us. Italy has done and will continue to do its part. With the additional responsibility deriving from being the G20 presidency this year, we are ready to work together with Gavi and all the other health actors, as well as the donor community, to mobilize the necessary political and financial support to defeat this pandemic. Together with the European Commission, we have convened a global health summit that will take place on the 21st of May. On that occasion, we aim to adopt a set of principles to guide the international community in pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. The experts tell us that this pandemic will not be the last one. We have to be better prepared for a future outbreak and invest now for tomorrow's universal health. I thank you all for your attention.
And thank you to Prime Minister Ardern for leading the way, and thank you as well to Minister Mortensen for Denmark's doubling of its support to COVAX. Dose sharing offers a vital supplement to the doses that will be purchased through COVAX. And next, we're going to hear from Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne, Secretary of State for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France.
Monsieur le Secrétaire d'État,
Mr. Secretary of State, Mr. President, Gavi, dear friends, thanks to the COVAX facility, a huge effort has been undertaken to contribute to the development, production, and fair access to COVID-19 vaccines. In less than 1 year, a global, equitable allocation framework has been defined. 38 million safe vaccines have already been delivered to 100 countries, 61 of these low and intermediate income. This progress shows the effectiveness of multilateralism, solidarity, and collective response to the pandemic. This is the whole meaning of this conference, and in this respect, I'm very happy to see the U.S. returning to multilateralism in healthcare and contribution to COVAX. This endorsement arrives at a key moment and gives us new reason for hope. France and Europe have been key supporters of ACT from the start. The Europe team contributes to 1/3 of the COVAX resources. President Emmanuel Macron decided to pledge 100 million euros as part of France's effort in support of ACT. This success is essential for all of us because we're racing against time, faced with a new emergence. To succeed, we have to face several challenges. First, of staying together to be effective. Our international response must be a joint effort with all stakeholders, partners, South, civil society. Secondly, avoid a crowding out effect on other healthcare programs. Vaccines alone will not defeat the virus. We need to simultaneously continue to invest in treatment, in tests, and health systems. Thirdly, we must not lose from sight the issue of fair access and strengthening vaccine production. This is the condition, or these are the conditions for the vaccine to be global public good. France is committed in this approach, and with President Macron, a charter for equitable access was adopted by 27 countries and organizations, and a sector on production capacity will be developed with the assistance of WHO, and the medicine patent pool should encourage North-South cooperation and production of vaccines in developing countries. Finally, France is very happy to see the finalization between COVAX and the Europe team on the provision of doses, which will make it possible to have the first donation via COVAX for Africa. This expression of solidarity is essential to accelerate deployment of the vaccine in the world. We invite all developed countries to be involved, because now is when it's necessary. And that was what the President of the Republic said to the G7, share at least 13 million doses, and France will play its part, its full part, up to us to face this challenge.
Secretary of State Lemoyne, your president has been a passionate supporter of dose sharing and an influential voice in the G7. It is now my pleasure to welcome the President of the European Investment Bank, Dr. Werner Hoyer, to the stage. COVAX represents the EIB's largest ever global public health investment. With its help, COVAX has been able to make 1 billion doses of vaccines available in low and middle income countries. Dr. Hoyer, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This is an important day for all those of us who truly believe in multilateral responses to global challenges. Let me thank Tony Blinken, Jose Manuel Barroso, and Seth Berkley for their leadership and for bringing us together to further strengthen our collective support to Gavi and the COVAX Advance Market Commitment. The European Investment Bank, the EU Bank, welcomes the strong support of the United States for COVAX and the renewed commitment of the US administration to find and promote multilateral solutions to global issues. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the EU Bank has engaged globally to support a rapid and targeted response as an integral part of Team Europe. In December last year, the EU Bank provided 400 million of financing to COVAX. This was essential to deliver vaccine doses as soon as they became available. I'm pleased that we are in the process of scaling up this financing to a total of 600 million euros to further increase access to vaccines in low and middle income countries. As we speak, EIB teams are working with partners in all regions to complement COVAX by supporting the procurement of additional vaccines for those currently not covered by donations. And we are helping countries be ready for the next pandemic by focusing on research and development, diagnostics, the manufacturing of vaccines and treatments, as well as primary healthcare. We stand 100% behind this initiative. Count on us. Thank you.
Je suis le professeur Bois-Narcisse.
I'm Professor Bois-Narcisse, the coordinator in charge for managing the COVID-19 pandemic here. Since the beginning of the outbreak, we've had some 302 patients in our intensive care unit of our hospital. The death rate is around 50–60%, depending on the period. It's a very high death rate. During my career in intensive care, I've never seen as many deaths in one unit over such a short period of time. When I go home, I'm persona non grata. Nobody wants to come near to me, so I have to start by changing all my clothes in my garage. All the clothes I've been wearing is put into a special bag, which is then put into a separate washing machine. It's only once I've taken a shower that I can talk to those around me. Some of the things we used to do, such as kissing, we can no longer do. We have to find other ways of showing and expressing our feelings. To all our partners in COVAX, Gavi, UNICEF, I would like to say thank you. I believe that thanks to their action, we were able to obtain sufficient number of doses to start vaccinating our population early. I'm convinced that with this vaccination, we will win the battle against the pandemic.
Ending the pandemic is about building a better world. It's about overcoming inequalities and providing a basis for truly sustainable growth. This is a cause passionately supported by our next two speakers, Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, and Antonio Costa, Prime Minister of Portugal.
I'm very pleased to send you this message in support of the Gavi COVAX Advance Market Commitment. The latest IMF forecast shows an improved outlook for the global economy, but we face a multi-speed recovery where advanced economies and a number of emerging markets grow relatively faster, while most developing countries are at risk of languishing with weak growth for years to come. In part, this is due to uneven access to vaccines. Right now, vaccine policy is the most important economic policy. We need to boost vaccine production and ensure fairer distribution, including reallocating excess doses from surplus to deficit countries. This is in the interest of all countries. The virus knows no borders. The longer it persists, the more scope there is for new variants to develop that could set back progress everywhere. And a faster rollout would not only save lives, but could add almost $9 trillion to the global economy by 2025. To get there, we need global cooperation to build up vaccine production capacity, including by boosting funding for the COVAX AMC facility. And we need dedicated funding for logistics to ensure effective supply and delivery chains everywhere. 1 year ago, people said a vaccine would take years to develop. Today, we have several effective vaccines in record time. For me, this is a source of great inspiration and shows what is possible when we work together. We can only truly defeat this pandemic by getting vaccines to everyone, everywhere. Let's do it.
In this pandemic, we all depend on each other. COVID-19 passes from person to person, from country to country, and from continent to continent. International solidarity is thus crucial to overcome this common challenge. COVAX plays an important part in that process. The European Union and its member states are among the lead contributors to COVAX with over 2.2 billion euros. 853 million euros have already been mobilized by Team Europe to guarantee equitable access to vaccines. Without international solidarity, we cannot eradicate the pandemic from the entire world, whether in our own neighborhood, in Latin America, in particularly in Africa. The pandemic has a disproportionate impact on those already most vulnerable. It impacts the lives of hundreds of millions of people, in particular in lower income countries. For their sake and for our own sake, support for global vaccination must be increased. Thank you.
A successful COVAX AMC requires access to vaccines as well as international support. And our next three leaders all play an important role in this story. Let's hear from Dr. Richard Hatchett, CEO of CEPI, Karina Gould, Minister of International Development of Canada, and Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer.
Last week, St. Lucia became the 100th country to receive doses from COVAX. COVAX reached this milestone just 42 days after its first international shipment. For many countries, doses from COVAX enabled the vaccination of healthcare workers in vulnerable populations for the first time. We owe these achievements to the support and generosity of our partners and donors. Thank you. Now we must do more. The world has entered a new phase of the pandemic. More transmissible and lethal COVID-19 variants have caused resurgent disease outbreaks worldwide and are driving overwhelming demand for vaccine. We fight an evolving virus, and fair access to vaccines is more important than ever to protect the most vulnerable, reduce the prevalence of disease, and slow viral mutation. COVAX provides the world's only end-to-end solution focused on ending the pandemic. As Gavi, WHO, and UNICEF roll out vaccines around the globe, CEPI is continuing to invest in crucial vaccine R&D to grow the portfolio of vaccines available to participating COVAX countries. To strengthen our defenses, we are supporting late-stage trials for additional candidates, future-proofing the portfolio by developing next-generation vaccines that target the variants and working to secure supply chains and extend manufacturing globally. We're planning for longer-term control of COVID-19 and related threats by funding the development of broadly protective coronavirus vaccines. Ultimately, our aspiration is to compress vaccine development timelines to as little as 100 days. Equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines will benefit everyone on the planet by ending the acute phase of the pandemic in the fastest and fairest way possible. With renewed financial support, commitment, and collaboration from our partners, COVAX can make this a reality.
In the 8 short weeks since COVAX began its unparalleled rollout of vaccines with the first plane landing in Accra, more than 100 countries have received doses. This is a really good start. Today, I am pleased to be part of the launch of the investment opportunity co-hosted by the United States and Gavi. Now, we must maintain the momentum so that COVID-19 vaccine doses reach frontline workers and high-risk populations in lower and middle-income countries. COVAX is the global mechanism to get doses to countries as quickly and fairly as possible. And this game-changing task can only be achieved with all of our support. Canada has been there with Gavi since day one as it undertook this mammoth task. We understood that getting COVAX off the ground was the critical first step toward ensuring that safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines were affordable and available to everyone, everywhere. In my role as AMC Engagement Group co-chair, I will do everything I can to keep the ambition high and to ensure that we are working as efficiently as possible. As leaders of this international effort, the choices we make now will shape the spread of the virus and determine how long we all face this global threat. It will be critical to get doses out to those who need them the most. National vaccine deployment cannot be passive. All countries need to take steps to identify barriers to access for high-risk groups. That means working together to remove barriers so that no one is left behind. As the pandemic evolves, so must we. It will be crucial to support the entire COVAX system, from research and development to procurement, delivery, and distribution. Therapeutics and diagnostics will help protect us all until we've been vaccinated. And strengthening health systems will make prevention, treatment, and care possible. Canada is committed to working with COVAX and its partners. Together, we must strive to ensure everyone, everywhere is vaccinated. Thank you.
On behalf of Pfizer and our vaccine partner BioNTech, I want to extend my heartfelt congratulations to COVAX and all of its partners on the progress that has been made thus far. Through collaboration and commitment, you have brought forth a global solution that is helping to bring breakthrough science to everyone, everywhere. Millions of COVID-19 vaccines have been received in more than 100 countries around the world at a truly remarkable pace. We have celebrated every delivery alongside you and watched with pride as the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has reached people in every region of the world, offering protection to those at risk and hope for all of us in the fight against this virus. But there is more work to be done. To continue this momentum and to end this pandemic, we must continue to foster the unprecedented collaboration we have seen across the public and private sectors. This includes the continued drive for equitable access to vaccines, as well as providing the expertise and resources that will strengthen healthcare systems and protect us not only from this crisis, but future threats as well. In this spirit, we are proud to continue to work with COVAX and governments around the world for one world protected. Thank you.
Thanks again for these rich insights, in particular from Richard, who, as Seth mentioned earlier, was there right at the beginning of COVAX's journey. As we near the close of this event, I'm excited to be joined by Farah Njehi from Speak Up Africa, an organization whose work has done so much to involve communities in public health across Africa. Farah, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jen. Excited to be here with you today. I'd like to start by stating that equity, safety, coverage, transparency, and accountability, in other words, good governance, are all key goals in COVID-19 vaccination country programs. But even in ordinary times, managing governance risk is challenging. COVID-19 response programs face significant risk associated with inefficiency, implementation delays, poor targeting of beneficiaries, and diversions of funds. These challenges are placing large demands on government's delivery capacity and accountability systems, which are even more aggravated by these unprecedented vaccination campaigns. This is why it is critical for governments and donors to strategically augment their capacities and efforts by expanding their collaboration with civil society organizations, particularly at the local and national levels. CSOs have decades of experience in public health, immunization, social protection, livelihood programs, and social accountability. However, governments must create a positive environment for collaboration with CSOs by ensuring that they are structurally involved in the national efforts and their skills and competence are utilized properly. By working constructively with government authorities, particularly at local and national levels, CSOs can help improve in at least 7 outcomes, including the implementation effectiveness using community engagement and feedback loops, responsiveness and transparency in public expenditure, accountability of public officials, detection and reporting on the delivery of services, economy and efficiency in public procurement and distribution, trust also between communities and government authorities, and finally, even the improved inclusion in government programs through representing the voices and the needs of marginalized and underrepresented groups. Lessons learned and good practices in CSO engagement, particularly in the routine immunization programs, are also applicable to the COVID-19 vaccination programs. Collaborating with CSOs will improve greatly equity, safety, coverage, transparency, accountability, and even public trust in COVID-19 vaccination programs. It will also save lives and allow faster opening of economies. I strongly believe that the key lies in diversified and creative partnerships. And for that to happen, we need a true shift in principle and in our collaboration ways that will definitely harness each and everyone's resources. Thank you, Jen.
For your reflections on the COVAX ambitions and the way forward. I'd now like to welcome Minister Wendy Morton, who's Foreign and Commonwealth and Affairs Minister for the European Neighbourhood and the Americas of the UK. Wendy, thank you for joining us.
I want to start by saying thank you to Gavi for their vital work and to Secretary Blinken and the US administration for their commitment and leadership here. Together, we must keep driving forward an effective multilateral approach to meet this once-in-a-generation challenge. There is a moral duty to act, as well as a strategic necessity to come together to defeat this virus. The pandemic will not be under control anywhere until it is under control everywhere. So we must accelerate equitable vaccine access. The UK played a vital role in founding COVAX, and we were pleased to host the Global Vaccine Summit last summer, where the initiative was officially launched. We've committed £548 million to COVAX AMC, including a match funding pledge that helped encourage $1 billion of commitments from other donors. Since the first COVAX vaccines were delivered in Côte d'Ivoire last month, the initiative has now delivered vaccines to over 100 countries and territories. That is a huge achievement. But of course, there remains much more to do. Through our expertise in genomics, the UK is playing a key role in identifying new variants, providing almost half, 48%, of the data that allows global surveillance of this virus. And the risk posed by these variants underscores the need to increase our ambition. We need to move quickly together if we are to end the acute phase of this pandemic. And the UK is championing this through our presidency of the G7. And we have committed to share the majority of our supply of surplus vaccine doses with COVAX. As a leading donor to COVAX, we welcome the new investment case and we applaud its ambition. Let's be clear, COVAX represents the fastest route out of this crisis. So we call on others to join us to enable COVAX to expand its supply and improve our collective ability to defeat this virus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Morton, for joining us from London. Now, before we hear from our final three speakers, I would like to thank you for your support and engagement. Be assured your commitment and support add up to the best chance our world has to ending this pandemic. With concluding remarks, I'm pleased to introduce Toshimitsu Motegi, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. Minister Motegi, over to you.
Mr. Blinken, Mr. Barros, the Gavi Board Chair, Excellencies, I would like to express my respect to the US government and the Gavi for co-hosting this event. In order to overcome the COVID-19 crisis, it is important to promote efforts to leave no one's health behind. Under the concept of human security, Japan has been offering full support for countries, including developing countries, in ensuring equitable access to vaccines. Japan announced its participation in the COVAX facility ahead of other countries and was the first donor to and in order to support the COVAX Advance vaccines to assist the Gavi in securing. Japan has already contributed $200 million to the COVAX and will continue to do its utmost support the initiative. In addition, Japan will co-host the contribute and various means, including the Quad, Japan, Australia, India, US framework for manufacturing, procurement and delivery of vaccines. Today, we are pleased to announce that Japan will co-host the AMC summit with Gavi in June. Many countries and regions have already received vaccines distributed through the COVAX facility and have started vaccine enrollment. However, the supply of vaccine and fundings are still insufficient, and there is an urgent need to further strengthen the COVAX facility. to ensure equitable access to safe, effective, and quality-assured vaccines to people in developing countries. Now is the time for the world leaders to fulfill promise to achieve universal health coverage, thereby delivering basic health care to everyone in the world. Japan remains fully committed to tackling and overcoming this crisis, hand in hand with many partners.
Thank you, Minister Motegi. We're already looking forward to June's summit. And now I will turn to our co-host for this event, Gloria Steele, the Acting Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development.
Thank you, Jen.
支援ありがとうございます。代表いたしまして、この非常に重要なコミットメントに参加でき、嬉しく思います。このコロナワクチンの公平な世界的
Distinguished guests for joining us here today. The rapid spread of COVID-19 and its emerging variants demonstrates that no nation can act alone in a global pandemic. Vaccinating as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, is the only way to reduce the tragic loss of life, end the pandemic, and move us toward economic and social recovery. However, as many have emphasized today, we must root our efforts in equity in order to achieve success. Multilateral cooperation through the Gavi COVAX Advance Market Commitment, and more broadly within the ACT Accelerator, is key to ensuring that people everywhere receive safe and effective vaccines against a virus that knows no bounds. I am proud that the initial U.S. contribution of $2 billion to COVAX this year, with another $2 billion planned next year, has helped to galvanize the important commitments made today and will continue to do so over the coming months. Through partnership and support to the ACT Accelerator, the U.S. government is also helping to expand global access to COVID-19 therapeutics and diagnostics. I would like to thank the donors and partners who are stepping up when the world needs our collective support the most. Just today, we have secured more than $300 million in new funding and commitments to share doses through COVAX. Only by tackling this pandemic together will we ultimately succeed. We must also remember that vaccines do not deliver themselves. It is critical that we support countries to administer vaccinations to everyone. That's why the United States is also helping countries to prepare and deploy vaccines to people at highest risk and with greatest need, including refugees and people who are displaced. We are supporting broader country readiness for vaccine distribution, ranging from logistics and support for cold chains to community engagement that builds confidence and trust in vaccines. Thank you again to Gavi and its partners for your collaboration. And thank you to all of you for your commitment to the health and well-being of individuals, families, and communities around the world. The US government also extends our gratitude to the government of Japan for its leadership as the host of this summer's Gavi COVAX AMC Summit. Through our joint efforts in the months to come, we look forward to overcoming this pandemic and building back a world that is even better prepared for future outbreaks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gloria Steele. And last but not least, welcome back, Professor Barroso. Your thoughts, please, on the event today and the path ahead.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we are closing our event, I thank you for your participation and contributions. I'm overwhelmed by what I witnessed today. A special word of warm thanks to all those who so generously made today new pledges, financial pledges, or those sharing pledges. Today, it was clearly demonstrated that COVID-19 brought us even closer than ever, and together we shall fight back harder to end this pandemic. Gavi and its alliance partners, WHO, CEPI, UNICEF, World Bank, and others, donors and countries, are ready to act together. Partnership is critical to the biggest global rollout of vaccines in history. Investment in COVAX is a prerequisite for recovery. Each day that passes allows the pandemic to grow stronger with more cases, more variants. Ending the acute phase of the pandemic is currently the best economic decision for any country. In a globalized world, all economies are interdependent. We can't just say to each other, your side of the boat is sinking. We are all on this together. That's why we call on donors, governments, private sector, philanthropists, to continue to show solidarity and generosity. And as we approach the Gavi COVAX AMC Summit in June, and now let me say a very big thank you to Japan. Japan will be hosting it. We look forward to continuing to partner closely with the US government, with all our valued donors and partners around the world, to ensure we can meet our goal of securing an additional $2 billion for COVAX in 2021. Thank you all very much.
And thank you very much, Professor Barroso. We have now come to the end of today's One World Protected Investment Opportunity launch. It's been an immense pleasure for me to be with you today. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I'd like to thank all of our speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules. We look forward to seeing you again in June.